The Falcon and the Winter Soldier has many problems with how it shows the motivations of each character. They each exist in their own bubble and are unwavered by the conversations they have with each other. Anytime character motivations are shown to the audience, it's almost always done by monologue. This method doesn't have to be a problem, but the show has given no opportunity for the characters to be contradicted by each other. The writing takes advantage of this fact to bypass realism. Characters begin stating their ideals, with their justifications often being factually incorrect. I wanted to make this video because I was often confused by why the characters would give flawed reasoning to why they have chosen their actions. I hope this video brings to light that the writers don't see the issues in their own writing. We will do this by going through examples of each character that is seen with these flaws. The examples will be in order from best to worst, so the criticisms will start off quite tame. I also wanted to say that this show has political messages in it, so my video will be covering the politics in this show. The show doesn't focus too heavily on real-world politics, so we'll be going over the more general terms and definitions. This video won't talk about any real-world politics or promote any particular ideology. I believe this limitation will be the best way to focus on what the show says instead of what can be interpreted from the show. Now that that's out of the way, let's look at a few examples. In episode 3, Zemo says the following: "The danger with people like him, America's super soldiers, is that we put them on pedestals. They become symbols, icons, and then we start to forget about their flaws. From there, cities fly, innocent people die." Zemo is intent on preventing the super soldier program from continuing because he believes it leads to the problems that super soldiers have caused in the past, including how Hydra and Nazi Germany were convinced to take the freedom of other countries. Zemo believes this is a direct result of the existence of super soldiers. Zemo believed the Ultron situation was a very similar case. It is not completely unfounded, as there are similarities between the two. The Iron Legion program lacked the accountability it required because of the role of authority that the Avengers placed themselves in. This attitude allowed Ultron to become as powerful as he was. But to say that the Super Soldier Serum is what led to Ultron is not a credible claim. Steve was opposed to the creation of Ultron and was fighting against it. This makes no sense to use as a point against super soldiers because Steve was the only one of them present. It says more about self-appointed heroes than the serum itself. Zemo talks about his distaste of super soldiers further in the next episode when he states, "The desire to become superhuman cannot be separated from supremacist ideals." Now, the belief that being a superhuman would make you better in many aspects does make you a supremacist in only the most technical way, not a supremacist of race or beliefs. Zemo is immediately contradicted by Bucky saying, "The serum never corrupted Steve," to which Zemo replies, "But there has never been another Steve Rogers, has there?" Zemo is currently working off of 2 examples to make this point. We can go through all 5 that may have been available to him. The Red Skull was certainly the worst of these, leading Hydra and forming a plan to take control of the world. While his superhuman ideals may have led him to this course of action, the Red Skull was previously a Nazi and held similar views for pursuits of power long before learning of the Super Soldier Project. The Red Skull's ideologies can't be a result of the Super Soldier Serum alone. Steve Rogers had taken the serum to serve his country. He fought his whole life and remained convicted when fighting for his own beliefs. He cared for the freedom of others. He fought against the organizations that would take those freedoms, and opposed the restrictions that would prevent him from doing so. This is as Bucky says. Bucky was given the Super Soldier Serum and brainwashed to become the Winter Soldier. Once he was free from his programming, he felt tremendous guilt for what he remembers doing as the Winter Soldier and works to make amends to those around him and those he has hurt in the past. He was also never corrupted by the serum and is the perfect example of another Steve Rogers, as Zemo puts it. The Hydra Death Squad had a variant of the serum which made them mentally unstable and caused them to rebel against Hydra. After they were put to sleep, they were never deployed. The serum had corrupted them, but it corrupted them beyond sanity due to the psychiatric problems it had caused. We cannot draw any conclusions as to how the serum would change their beliefs. It is unclear whether Zemo knew about Isaiah, however it is possible and likely that leaked Hydra files would mention him, so he will be included here. Isaiah was an American super soldier and once given the serum, would defy orders to save his own men. He was a super soldier who maintained his compassion for others and never gave into the supremacist ideals that Zemo was talking about. Of the 5 examples Zemo could have looked into, only one of them followed the path he describes as inevitable. Despite being given examples of other super soldiers to look at, he refuses to do so. No one speaks up to the incorrect statement, "There has never been another Steve Rogers," that Bucky is able to live up to. While making this video, Black Widow has come out and introduces Red Guardian, another super soldier. He remains patriotic until he's betrayed by Dreykov and is content with what he's done in his life and doesn't pursue power. Zemo being evil isn't enough to justify that his views on the world are irrational when the show makes a point to show that Zemo holds these beliefs above anything. He believes he is capable of convincing others his thoughts are rational, and characters around him are made incapable of disputing these points. Don't get me wrong, I still think Zemo is one of the better characters in the show. In the cases we've talked about, you could even argue that Bucky and Sam being unable to dispute Zemo's points is the main issue, and not what Zemo was saying. But regardless of where the issue lies, the issue is still there. Sam and Bucky are incapable of disagreeing with Zemo, even when he states that Bucky is inevitably going to become an authoritarian dictator. Zemo has the strongest and best defined motivations of any character in this show. However, the fact that the show leaves his final point unanswered also leaves room to prove him wrong. Zemo states that he is motivated by the examples that are shown to us, despite the MCU showing the opposite of what he says, and he's left contradicted with nothing to follow up with. The Dora Milaje have one major line in the show that goes uncontested. The Dora Milaje have jurisdiction wherever the Dora Milaje find themselves to be. If we take this literally, we find that it is simply not true. The Dora Milaje do not have permission from the UN or Latvia to be operating in the country. This is, of course, not what is meant by the statement. What is meant is that they do not care for the jurisdiction and believe themselves just in imposing their own will in other countries. They believe themselves to be above the laws of other countries. They should be reported for violating international law, willing to kill across borders without any permission or transparency. This will put the UN at war with Wakanda. Believing to have better ideas isn't a good enough reason to enact justice in other countries. That is textbook imperialism. A point I missed on my first time watching through was that this also goes against what King T'Chaka said. They are fighting to avenge the death of a man who was killed at a conference to talk about why he believed individuals shouldn't invade other countries to enact their own justice. Why are they going against the principles of a person they claim to be fighting for? Now we see Karli and this guy Nico talk about their plans to make more super soldiers. If you're doing something, and it makes you scared, it's probably because you're doing the right thing. Now the problem with this line is immediately apparent. If something makes you scared, it isn't always the right thing to do. For example, a person could be scared to stick their hand in a blender. A person could be scared to rob a convenience store. And more importantly, a person could be scared to kill 3 people to sway the vote of a democratic government. Now there's something very important to establish here. Karli is a terrorist. She commits acts of terror for political gain. Here's how one of her attacks is reported on the news. 11 injured, 3 dead. They have a list of demands and are promising more attacks if those demands aren't met in full. Not only is she attacking places to steal from them, she is killing people in order to do so. These goals are politically motivated, and the example from the news reading was Karli using intimidation tactics for political leverage. Definitely terrorism. This will come up later when we discuss the way Karli is talked about later in the show. When another flag smasher, Dovich, questions Karli about this attack, we get these lines. There were still people in there. This is the only language these people understand. This is not true. The GRC is shown to be made up of politicians that have been democratically elected, including an American senator, the Indian Prime Minister, and a Filipino representative. Most of the Western world has a do not negotiate with terrorists policy. The actions Karli has taken did not affect their decision to continue their hunt for her and did not sway them to make new policies for the GRC. Karli believes she is justified to kill, but if someone has issues with how the government is treating them, there are many ways to fight back without turning to violence or even breaking any laws. The first step would be to protest and turn to journalism. Back to Nico's speech we hear, back then, there was just good and bad, but the world's more complicated now. But that's not true. The world has always had this moral ambiguity, especially in the Captain America movies, with Steve defying his government to uncover Hydra working within S.H.I.E.L.D., as well as Steve ordering the destruction of the Insight helicarriers and destroying the Triskelion, which caused casualties, as well as defying the UN in Civil War because he thought he could better save people if he broke the law. This is unlike the current MCU, where we see moral ambiguity used to justify murder when it contradicts her motives to do so. They need a leader who looks like them, who understands their pain. Someone who understands that today's heroes don't have the luxury of keeping their hands clean. Karli and Nico are talking about how they wish to justify the murders they commit by saying it's for the betterment of everyone. it is still unclear why some people are worth saving and others are worth murdering. And to remain consistent with how she's characterized in the show so far, Karli decides to spread her politics during a eulogy to her maternal figure. They imposed struggle and hardship on us, then labelled us criminals for pushing back. Now the show would benefit from showing us some of the struggle. The only thing we've seen so far is one place that hasn't received doctors or teachers. Basic human needs, and certainly something to complain about, but nothing to turn to terrorism for. And she has the audacity to say they labelled us as criminals for pushing back. If we recall what she means by pushing back, she means that she has killed 3 people and stolen medical supplies for herself and whoever she deemed better suited for them instead of their intended recipients. They were labelled criminals for committing crimes, but the struggle is what brings us all together. People who have nothing in common. For we are, after all, simply one world and one people. So the best description for the people she has judged as more deserving is those who had lost their homes when the Vanished came back. It is difficult to tell what one world, one people means when she kills based on a person's place in this conflict. The one world, one people message is lost when she begins to prescribe people into groups of who is acceptable to kill. Bucky has the chance to talk to Karli. We see her claim that her cause is more than her own personal vendetta. I've done this before, kid. I know how it ends. It doesn't matter if I don't survive this. I'm fighting for something bigger than myself. With all the bodies you've collected, have you ever been able to say the same? You don't think I ever fought for something bigger than myself. That's all I ever tried to do, and I failed twice. Karli's current plan is to prevent relocation programs in order to benefit her group over another group that would suffer in their place. We hear of the other groups when the senator asks this question later in the episode. And the people who reappeared only to find someone else living in their family home. They just end up homeless? Seeing her own cause as altruistic becomes concerning when the ramifications of people who aren't immediately around her are not considered and she takes such drastic actions. She describes her cause as bigger than herself, something Bucky wouldn't understand. Except that Bucky is a World War II veteran and was famous for it long before being seen as the Winter Soldier. Karli knows this and believes her cause to be above all others. The only way this makes sense is if Karli believes the Flagsmashers are more deserving than any other group. Karli spends a lot of time talking to Sam, and we find out more about how she lacks empathy and follows her cause blindly, without actually finding a reason behind her cause. She first talks about how losing a loved one is more impactful to her than it could be to Sam. I'm sorry for your loss. Don't condescend to me, I'm not a child. I'm not condescending, I know what it feels like to lose someone. Believe me. No you don't, not like this. She then continues to justify what she has done to the people she has hurt and killed. So you want me to stop because people are getting hurt, right? But Sam, what if I'm making the world a better place? No, it's not a better place if you're killing people. It's just different. Now Sam does a poor job explaining why this is an awful way to view her actions, but it's the closest the show comes to making a rebuttal against Karli. It's very clear that Karli's definition of better is based solely on her own judgment. Her actions only benefit those close to her and are a detriment to everyone she opposes. The better place she is creating is only better to her and the people she has chosen. Everything I do is to end supremacy. These corporations and the beasts who run them, they're the supremacists. Except that our current actions are opposing world governments and not corporations, but that's beside the point here. The only politicians we have seen on screen have stated that they have not found a better solution to the problem. We'll talk about that later. What's even more concerning is how she values human life. The way she justifies her killing makes it even more confusing as to why she cares about the people she tries to keep from suffering. You're killing innocent people. They're not innocent, they're roadblocks in my journey and I'd kill them again if I had to. Wow. No, I didn't mean it like that. You tricked me into sounding like... Like what? Firstly, Karli was not tricked into saying this. She said it unprompted after Sam called them innocent. She claims that anyone who stands in her way is a roadblock in my journey, and claims that alone makes them not innocent. She has the exact same response when it comes to killing Sam. I don't want to hurt you. You're just a tool in the regimes I'm looking to destroy. You're not hiding behind a shield. If I were to kill you, it'd be meaningless. The next question would be whether or not the people she killed at the GRC supply facility were just tools and meaningless to kill, and whether or not the people who were bound to the building she crushed them with were still roadblocks at that point. She brings the Flagsmashers back to her hideout to find everyone there gone. It says here the GRC accused them of harbouring and abetting international fugitives, so they raided the place and shut it down. There was more than an accusation. The facility was harbouring and abetting the Flagsmashers, and the GRC had evidence of this. Karli follows up with this line: Matthias, Mama Donya, Nico, I've lost count of how many others. How many times do we have to pay with our lives just to be citizens of this goddamn planet? Karli ignores that she has killed just as many people, and is indirectly responsible for the deaths of all three of these people. Matthias was killed in a suicide run at a GRC convoy he threatened to attack while allowing the Flagsmashers to escape with stolen medicine. Nico died in a fight after attempting to kill the person he was fighting. Both of these deaths were a risk they took to further the cause of the Flagsmashers. Mama Donya's death was unrelated to their cause. She died of tuberculosis, which could have been treated if she wasn't in the one facility that was also hiding terrorists. All three of these deaths were caused by Karli's actions. We are shown Karli mourning for others, and we know her goals are to improve the living situations for her own people. We know she isn't just a sociopath who doesn't believe there are any consequences for killing people. She just doesn't care about anyone other than herself. We are shown two sides of Karli. One that can kill solely for political gain, and one that talks about the oppression she faces from the government. It is ridiculous to see. And to top it all off, Karli tells John something we've already heard from her. I didn't mean to kill your friend. I don't want to hurt people that don't matter. You don't think Lamar's life mattered? Not to my fight. She is indifferent to the people she has killed. She lacks remorse for anyone not associated with her. We're met with a character that will kill to get what she wants. She separates people by groups and circumstances, to show different morals to different people. She claims to be fighting to end suffering, but does so by causing more suffering, and justifies it by labelling oppressors and victims. She considers herself capable of making these judgments, and carrying them out on her own. What's most frustrating is that this structure could make an interesting villain. Thanos shares a few of these qualities, but what makes Thanos work is that he doesn't believe he is morally right, but believes his solution is the only possibility when it comes to achieving his goals. He understands why people oppose him. He has thought of opposing ideas as naive and believes his solution can be justified to others. We even see him frustrated with his daughter when she will not listen to his reasoning. We see him stop to talk to Doctor Strange because he believes he can avoid a fight. It has worked in the past on his children, especially Ebony Maw. Thanos also lacks the prejudice and discrimination when it comes to his betterment of the universe. Prejudice makes the promise of salvation for all paradoxical. Karli differs from Thanos because she has this prejudice, to help her people at the expense of others, and believes she is morally right in doing so. There is an idea that Karli's cause can be separated from her methods, when it is very important that her methods should align with her cause. Her methods do not work without the idea of an us versus them mentality, despite her cause being to bring the whole world together. The show never addresses this further than the statement, killing people is wrong. This would be okay to have a selfish and flawed villain that holds a motivation to fight other groups out of prejudice. In Marvel we have Hydra, the Dark Elves, and the Kree. The problem occurs when the villains are left without opposition. This may not have been what the writers intended when making the show, but it doesn't help that the protagonist has found a way to rationalize Karli's actions. Like I've said, having a villain with Karli's motivations would be fine if the show didn't attempt to paint her as morally grey or to be empathized with. We see pre-established heroes being used for this very purpose. Sam is shown to agree with Karli's motivations, but not her methods. The show does not talk about where the separation between the two topics is when they contradict each other so heavily. None of the previous issues are addressed. Here is an example of Sam and Bucky talking about Karli. To them, at least Karli's doing something. You really think her ends justify her means? Then she's no different from him, or anybody else we've fought. She's different, she's not motivated by the same things. When Sam says Karli's doing something, he's referring to the murder of 3 people in a terrorist attack and stealing medical supplies on multiple occasions. By being motivated by different things, this is referring to the fact that she wants to improve the well-being of people around her. No character in the show sees this contradiction. Now we're ready to skip to the worst monologue in the show. This is how the issues are presented at their conclusion. We have the context of what Karli has done and what she has said. We know she values human life based on her own judgment, and often finds it acceptable to kill specifically for that person's death. What is Sam to do other than agree with her message? Here is our first part. You have to stop calling them terrorists. What else should we call them? Your peacekeeping troops carrying weapons are forcing millions of people into settlements around the world, right? What do you think those people are going to call you? These labels, terrorists, refugee, thug. They're often used to get around the question, why? This line that labels are dismissive ignores that Sam is dismissing the fact that they are committing crimes and are definitely terrorists. The fact that their troops carry weapons is irrelevant. They are acting in remote areas where they need to defend themselves. Labels do not change any part of the conversation, especially if they are accurate. A government is taking action after a disaster occurs with a working solution. If there is a better solution, no one has presented it, and that's what is brought up next. Those settlements that happened 5 years ago, do you think it is fair for governments to have to support them? Yes. And the people who reappeared, only to find someone else living in their family home, they just end up homeless? There are problems with the notions that Karli and Sam want. The sentiment is there, but it has not been thought through. For real action to be taken at any level of authority, solutions have to be feasible and logical. This is exactly what the senator is saying when we are met with this response. Look, I get it, but you have no idea how complicated this situation is. You know what? You're right. And that's a good thing. We finally have a common struggle now. Sam's solution is literally that he hasn't thought about it and left it up to someone else to follow his words to the letter. How does this make sense? Think about it. For once, all the people who've been begging, and I mean literally begging for you to feel how hard any given day is. Now you know. How did it feel to be helpless? Now if you could remember what it was like to be helpless and face a force so powerful it could erase half the planet, you would know that you're about to have the exact same impact. What the hell, Sam? You wish ill on these people with your now you know what it feels like bullshit? These situations are not comparable. Everyone faced the disaster that Thanos gave them, but humanitarian efforts that are poorly managed due to scale alone are not comparable to threats on politicians' lives for making decisions that were democratic and feasible. The GRC is using what they have to make the best solutions, and comparing them to a maniacal god is ignorant and an awful thing to say about them. If your point doesn't stand up to criticism, you could always change the subject. This isn't about easy decisions, Senator. You just don't understand. I'm a black man carrying the stars and stripes. What don't I understand? Every time I pick this thing up, I know there are millions of people out there who are going to hate me for it. To be clear, I do believe Sam would receive a racist sentiment from some for taking up the mantle of Captain America. I wouldn't make a dispute there. But this has nothing to do with the political ramifications of the previous point, other than a vague understanding of the word hardship. I feel it, the stares, the judgment, and there's nothing I can do to change it. Yet I'm still here. No super serum, no blonde hair or blue eyes. According to Sam, Captain America was liked because he fit the Aryan ideal. Steve fought against Nazis in the Second World War because of the racist policies they wanted to enforce. What an awful thing to say about your friend. To make yourself seem deserving to be the new Captain America, you have to discredit the man who entrusted the role to you. For fuck's sake, Sam. We can't demand that people step up if we don't meet them halfway. They have already met them halfway. They ensured shelters existed for people to move to. We have been given one example where the conditions weren't perfect, but they were not left with nothing. Look, you control the banks. Shit, you can move borders. You can knock down a forest with an email. You can feed 1 million people with a phone call. But the question is, who's in the room with you when you're making those decisions, Is it the people you're going to impact? Nothing Sam is saying is at all helpful. Controlling the banks doesn't help. Do you expect them to print more money? Shuffle some numbers around to make resources appear out of thin air? Global economy doesn't just become better at the whim of a bank. Moving borders will take years of bureaucracy unless you want to start another world war. The GRC is an international effort, so moving borders wouldn't have an effect on kicking people out of homes. And as for the line, feed 1 million people with a phone call, millions of people are fed every day. Charities exist for this very purpose. The problem is there are billions of people in the world. Charities put a large dent into the issue of world hunger, but the solution Sam is proposing is to prioritise Karli's million over the rest of the world's population, because that would stop her from killing people. Sam is calling out the GRC for not bending to the will of terrorists. I mean, this girl died trying to stop you, and no one has stopped for 1 second to ask why. We don't need a why. Her methods of stopping the GRC were terrorism. Sam is blaming the government for attempts the Flagsmashers made to kill them. A government treating the rhetoric of a terrorist as illegitimate is the issue Sam is pointing out here. The rest of the speech is more of the same. But to wrap things up, Sam still has one more trick up his sleeve. You've got to do better, Senator. This sums up the extent of any substance Sam has. No solutions, no ideas, just a request for authoritarian action in other countries to prioritize the needs of anyone Karli liked. That's about everything. Zemo does what he pleases because no one has the mental capacity to keep up with him. The Dora Milaje believe themselves above the rest of the world to impose the imperialist rule of Wakanda on a global scale. Karli hasn't realised she's selfish, and neither has Sam. World governments should be considered evil and lazy unless they prioritise the well-being of terrorists. The show's writing is incredibly flawed, and I found the easiest place to find this is to listen to the monologues given. But this method has left out discussion of many of the other poor decisions in the show. Zemo is allowed to do as he pleases with no repercussions. The Dora Milaje are willing to kill, and Sam is suddenly terrible at espionage despite this talent being introduced even before his wings. We also see Bucky's story get sidelined and left unresolved. It's disappointing to see many of the new MCU shows suffer from poor writing. These shows have a very high budget, and are estimated to cost up to $25 million per episode. It certainly shows too. The CGI, acting and sound are all great for most of the show. But we have poorly made characters introduced, returning characters being reduced to prop up these new characters, and old characters being pushed down to prop up the ones that take their place. If we can't tell a good story, the show is brought down as a whole. The high quality elements are only there to serve a broken show that pretends to be something it's not. It's a waste of talent. Thanks for watching. If there's anything you want to talk to me about in this video, I'll be responding to the comments, and I'll be on Twitter. Also, I'll be streaming on Twitch if you want to talk to me live. My socials are linked in the description. I plan on making some more videos soon, maybe about how certain video games treat minigames, or something else entirely. My recommended videos would go here if I had any. My avatar and background card are the same colour, but it's there somewhere.